Hello everyone, I'm CoolGuy, welcome back, and today we have part 3 of my tips to improve KD series. The topic is movement and positioning. There's a lot that goes into these two, and before we get into it, the first 2 episodes of the series have had good reception. I still get messages saying that the tips have helped in comments on Twitter, emails, a lot of players from other games as well. Now these videos build off of each other, so if you haven't watched part 1 and part 2, those are going to be down below in the description, and the first video has a card at the top of the screen right now. All of this is a journey to become a better player. With these guides, what I try to teach is becoming more of a cerebral player, setting yourself up for success, your mental game, thought process, and your awareness. And once you set yourself up, things become easier because you're in control. That's what we want to do. One of the biggest things to take away from this entire series, past, now, and into the future, is going to be controlling your gunfights. You play chess, they play checkers, because when you build this foundation, you know what to do, where to go, why to do it, and importantly, why you don't do it at times. When you control the engagement, you're the deciding player, you make them play your game, and you don't play theirs. These guides take time to do, and I work on them when I have time, and I know a lot of people want to see them, so I try to take special care and try to make sure that they're easy to understand and execute. That way when you practice with purpose. And I won't feed you any false information to form any bad habits. But let's get one thing straight though, the topic is movement and positioning, but in a first-person shooter and a third-person shooter, the whole goal is to out-aim them. You out-aim them, you outshoot them, you win. It's pretty simple. That's the overall goal to obtain, but you can outmaneuver them, you can outthink them. Little subtleties in your game to make them think, your placement before a gunfight is just as important as what you do in the gunfight. And if you have the cover, you can be the player that decides how it all goes down. Your map navigation and rotation is one of the most important aspects to learn in a first or third person shooter, as well as the angles that you use, creating those angles, and denying enemy angles with your map navigation. There are ways to set yourself up for success, there are ways to get to areas with minimal damage taken, and ways that lead you to getting the first shot. Map movement is relative to the game that you're playing. This is a Destiny channel, so this video is Destiny focused. And there are tips specifically for Destiny, however some of the information applies to Battle Royale games and other arena shooters like Apex Legends, Halo, Fortnite, things like that. A lot of this video is in a controlled setting to show what we're talking about. And I've said it before in a previous episode, when a lot of players see videos like this, they expect very instant success, but you have to work at it. It doesn't just happen overnight. Like I said, you practice with purpose, and you start learning from your mistakes. The first thing that we're going to go over is going to be Destiny specific. It's going to be the knee slide. Maybe you watch your favorite streamer, content creator, they knee slide everywhere. You think it's cool, and to be clear, it is cool, no doubt, but some players emulate that. There is a reason that players do this. You do want to knee slide while you're moving around the map, especially when you see red on the radar, because when you knee slide, this takes you off the enemy radar for a brief moment. It will ping the radar, and then you'll disappear, and you wouldn't think that this is important, but it is. You can knee slide one way, knee slide back, their radar tells them something completely different. This is your movement. And you have to think about how both mechanics are working, because you can see on your radar when you knee slide, your triangle goes away. This is the time that you're off of your opponent's radar. And this also happens when you crouch. Now on the other side, remember that after you get done aiming down sights, the radar comes back slowly. There is a mod that you can put on your weapon so this doesn't happen, but this is that window that they don't see anything. Enemy players could be aiming down sights, shooting at something. When they get out of aim down sights and you're knee sliding, you're not going to show up. You do have the jump on them. And a lot of times, players just go in and out of aim down sights. There's no way of knowing when it happens, and it doesn't even have to be about timing, it just happens, but it does mess up the radar. Like right here, I'm rounding the corner, I see them, so if I see them, I know they see me. I keep sliding, and one of them is aim down sights with the sniper. The other one is late, and I have the jump on them. I take them out, and then the sniper figures out what's going on, I take him out. But in this scenario, again, there's no way of really knowing if they saw me late or not, but it does happen. And to grasp how the radar is working, let's take another example of another player doing it to me. This hunter's knee sliding with this movement. If you look at my radar, look what it did to it. We had a very faint ping on the left side of my radar. And then they knee slide into my view. Imagine if I wasn't looking in this direction, because at first glance, this player appears to be on the opposite side of the cover near mid. If I had disregarded that, and it was just looking to my right side, or I went to my right, he has easy shots on my back. That is the kind of things that knee sliding does. It's important to your movement, going to and away from areas, and you also have to think that when you're clumped up with teammates, this is one of the best times to do it. 2, 3, 4 of you are together. You're all going to appear bright red on the enemy radar because there's so many of you. Well, that's when you start breaking off and knee sliding, because they're focused on that big red, large threat coming at them. Meanwhile, you're moving to a more advantageous position with minimal sight. That's a really big thing to take away from this video. On console, it can be tough if you play default and you don't claw, and what I recommend is switching to Puppeteer if you play default and you don't claw. Other controller layouts have this too, but all Puppeteer does is switch R3 which is clicking in your right stick, and B, or circle. As it stands with default, when you press the right stick in, you inspect players in Destiny. You have to play claw or physically take your thumb off the stick to press B or circle. All Puppeteer's doing is switching those two things. That way your thumb is right on the right stick, you can click it, knee slide, crouch, do everything that you need to do, and B is far away. So start incorporating knee sliding into your game. With your movement, it gets you low, it gets you off the radar, it does so much for the game of Destiny. Next, let's talk about map design, map flow, and spawn systems. They're important factors with map navigation, your movement. Each map plays differently, it's important to know the flow of the map and then make decisions based off of that. With some maps, some are a traditional 3-lane map, meaning they have a left, middle, and right lane. You see this with Citadel, Endless Vale, Midtown, Convergence. Some maps have symmetry like Bannerfall or Burnout. Some of them are all over the place or have a circular feel like Javelin or Retribution, also known as the Death Donuts. But you want to start recognizing a map's flow, because each one does have a flow to it. Common choke points, common spawns. At those spawns, players generally go the same way from the spawn. They mostly move to the same common choke point. That's going to be the flow of the map. So what you need to do is to know when to go with the map flow and then when to go against it. Because if you control mid-map, you're controlling the flow of the game. You want to stay doing that. Most of the 3-lane maps have a lane that gets used very heavily, one that's kind of used, but there's always one that's used the least. For the ones that we mentioned, let's go over Citadel real quick. The flow of the map involves outside B area. The next lane used is mid lane, but then we have one that doesn't get used. That's the cave lane. This lane gets very little traffic, so you can use this lane to get to mid. You can use it to get to the jump up looking into their spawn. You can see the choke point from each side. The majority of the fighting happens outside B under the gazebo on this map. So you can use this lane to break the flow a little bit. And what this also does is add presence. Just your presence makes a difference. When you really think about it with this example, you ping the enemy radar from anyone in the mid area and also any enemies that are close on the outside B. So everyone's having the gunfights that they always do at the regular choke points, the regular flow of the map, but now they know that you're there. Your presence there makes them think. Maybe they might actually pursue you and your team actually starts getting mid control. And this goes for all maps. You need to recognize the flow of what's going on and you need to work against it if you need to. Let's next take Convergence. Generally when you spawn, you go over to heavy or you go to mid map. Those are the two heavily used lanes. The outside lane isn't used that much. This is the lane that you can start going to. From there, you can jump up to mid, you can take shots from down there, you can go to their side. You change it up a little bit, and again, it's just your presence that helps. They know that you're down there, and that's a threat. And for your enemy, it's starting to have multiple targets in different areas on different levels to pay attention to. And this map is one that gets played the same a lot. You go to mid, you lose mid control, you're now in the spawn, they're now coming to your spawn, you fight out of it, you're in a spawn trap. So you need to break that flow a little bit. Use the outside lane. It might pull one or two of those enemy players from the spawn trap, and that way your team has a better chance of breaking that trap when you come to the side or behind them. And now's also a really good time to show examples of other things. Earlier we talked about minimizing damage when you go to the location that you want to go. You do that by denying angles and creating new ones for yourself. At the start of the game, at any time during it, there are going to be snipers and scout users in that heavy main lane in mid. So if you go to this area, you have 3 options. And again, this is either at the start of the game or mid game. Number 1, you're sniping or you have a scout. You go there and immediately are challenging the lane. Number 2, when going to mid-map, avoid that lane. Deny the angle by creating a new one. So you hug the inside wall on each side when you're moving. And when you're here, you now have 3 lanes to choose. You can go straight to B, you have a lane next to the bridge, and then you have the bridge itself. And then from the bridge, you can go to the heavy, and so on. So these are the types of things that you want to do when you're moving. If you aren't sniping or you don't have a long-range weapon, don't take that sniper mid lane. Don't even be out there. This way you're taking away unnecessary deaths, use that inside wall and start making decisions once you're here. And number 3 is to use that outside lane. Again, no one really uses it and usually it has very little to no resistance at all. Meanwhile, while you're moving and doing all this, knee slide to throw off the radar, especially when you're in this area hugging this inside lane. Because again, when you're here, you have 3 to choose from, and when you're knee sliding, it's going to ping different things on your enemy's radar. Now, we don't have time to go through every map, but this applies to all of them. And most of the time, especially in these long-range engagements, unless you're equipped for it, for that choke point, you don't need to be there. You need to be moving to get inside and closer to your enemy. And that goes all the way back to the very first video, be next to cover. It's when you're next to cover, you have more options. So when you're moving, you're generally close to cover. That way you can go in and out. You're not going to be out in the open. And by doing that, you're denying angles on your enemy that they have on you. And when players do come at you, you're gonna have the jump on them because you're controlling what's going on with your movement. Next up is map rotation. Rotating to an area is setting up for the next team fight or gunfight, being there first. You know when to do this by your game sense, your map knowledge, and the position of your teammates. Destiny spawns are fairly easy to determine. So is Call of Duty spawns, so are Halo spawns. And Destiny, you kind of think of it like every game is Control. If your team spawns on the A side, the enemy team's gonna be spawning on C side. This goes for any game type, that's the core mechanic. The spawn flips when your team pushes about 70% or more into their spawn. Now there are some maps, there are a couple that have very heavily weighted spawns, and it takes a lot for them to get to flip, but most of them are fine. Each map has a 50-yard line, it has a mid-map. The spawns are separated by that line, each one. And in the background, we have some examples. When you push into their spawn, again, about 70-80% into it, it's gonna flip at some point. And for it to do that, 2 or more of the teammates need to be pushing heavily in there. If you're the one that's pushing into the spawn and doing that, finish off the push. And as you're doing that, it will flip to the opposite side. So when you notice your team doing this, stop, rotate to set up for the next fight. And you can be aggressive if you have a super, and this is a rotation. You also rotate to set up for heavy. Say you know it's gonna spawn up in 20-30 seconds. You start gradually moving over there, take position, take point on it, and that way you or your team can secure it. A lot of that is your awareness, your movement to rotate to the next area of engagement. So all of this is keeping in mind spawn systems, map design, map flow, getting to areas you want with little resistance. All of this builds off the first video, seeing red on the radar, being next to cover, all of it coexist. Now we're just adding in where and how you move. Every single piece is to set yourself up for success, to give you the upper hand and not play someone else's game and making them play yours. That way you're in control of the engagement and what goes on. Keep this in mind in your next play session. To start off, one of the best things you can do is to hug cover as you're navigating the map. This is keeping everything in front of you. This gets you out of the open, and more times than not, since you're denying lanes, someone has to come into your lane, into your angle that you're creating before you go into theirs. And there's also little things, little subtleties like the B flag on Bannerfall. When you're capping it, you should know what side that your enemy's gonna be spawning on, because you approach from one side, they should be on the opposite side. So when you're capping B, you need to hug the side of the zone to deny the angle from the mid sniper lane. And when you do that, you only have to worry about 2 other routes. The one that's right next to you and the other being inside behind B. And if you get pushed from that mid lane, that sniper lane, you can still deny that sniper angle and you can make that gunfight happen without that lane in play. It's little things like this. I have a number of these videos written down on paper. The next part's gonna be aggressive versus passive play styles. When and how to do both. There's a lot of good things to talk about in that one. And just think about an aggressive play style, a passive play style. Think about how those fit with what we went over today in this video. And also let me know if there's anything that you would like to see covered in an episode of this series. If you're new to the channel, remember to hit the subscribe button, like and comment if you guys see fit. When you practice, practice with purpose, learn from your mistakes, and get better. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until the next one, I am CoolGuy.